Hi, my name is Rob Marshall. I'm the System Center Configuration Manager MVP, and today live from Seattle, where we're having the MVP 2013 Summit. I have Noel Brady here from WindowsNoob fame. He's basically going to walk us through OSD scenarios for backup, refresh, and new computers from XP to Win 7 with BitLocker enabled. Now, I'm going to hand over to Noel. We're doing this as a very informal ad hoc recording, and it's all done via a camera phone, so you're going to have to excuse the freestyling here. But I'm going to introduce Noel, and he's going to give you a little preamble into how this is all going to work, and then we're going to try and switch over to a laptop and give you a demo of this. What I will say before I will hand over to Noel is that all of that you see here this evening is available as guides on WindowsNoob. So any questions or any stuff that you have, then visit WindowsNoobs.com website and have a look at these wonderful guides from Noel, amongst all the other wonderful stuff that Noel does offer. So I would like to hand over to Noel, who's just holding this phone for us. So Here we go.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'll explain a little bit about the actual front-end HTA. It's called the CM12 BitLocker front-end HTA, and BitLocker is in the title there, and that's very important because it can handle the refresh scenario and the new computer scenario with BitLocker. So you can deploy Windows 8 computers with BitLocker enabled or without BitLocker enabled, and you can refresh from XP to Windows 8 or Windows 7 using BitLocker scenarios. So let's get right stuck into it. And we're going to PXE boot this client computer here. I don't know if you can see. So I'm doing a network boot, going to boot to Windows PE. And of course this is live, so
Hopefully we won't have any gremlins this evening.
yeah. Press F12. Off it goes. Now that'll take a while. Why don't you look over here for a moment while it's loading up. On the left hand side I've got my configuration manager server, and I also have an MBAM server, MBAM 2 actually, and the MBAM server is a key part of the BitLocker refresh. Here you have a close-up of the MBAM database in SQL, and I've actually opened up a table in there called recovery and hardware core.keys. If you right-click on that table and choose select the top 100 rows, you will see that it has a bunch of values in here, and I will those values end up in there via the installation of the MBAM client at the end of the task sequence. So basically what you have to understand here is that the computer that we're PXE booting has already been installed with Windows 8, and it has the MBAM client installed on it. So it has already reported into the MBAM server, and its key is now in the MBAM database. So just to show you something, I'm going to open up the C drive. We can see that there's very little space there because that is in fact the BD partition. If I click on the D drive, it tells you this drive is locked by BitLocker drive encryption. You must unlock this drive from control panel. Well, we're going to just completely ignore that statement because we're going to unlock it using a script which connects directly to the MBAM database, to the SQL database, and pulls the recovery key from there, unlocks the drive and suspends it so that we can restart the computer and install Windows 8. So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to kick off the task sequence. And here's the task sequence in question, the CM12 front-end HTA. And that's available on WindowsNoob.com. And we'll select Next. Now this will take a couple of moments while it's loading. So let's go back here to SQL. Because I want to show you something on the MBAM server. On the MBAM server, if I right click on that database and click on properties, you will see that we have permissions, and we have this user called OSD, and you must make sure that the user has both the connect permission and select. because without those two permissions, it won't be able to pull the key from the database. So what I can point out here is this field here, number 7, sorry, ID 7, and you have the recovery key ID and the recovery key. That information is going to be pulled by our script in Windows PE to unlock the drive, and I'll show you where that happens a little bit later. So that's the MBAM database. Let's go look at the Configuration Manager task sequence now itself. So right now you will see we have a very extensive task sequence with many steps in it, because there are many things happening in this front-end HTA. The key thing that you're interested in, of course, is BitLocker. So one of the first things we do, even before the HTA displays, is we check the BIOS to see is it a Dell or a Lenovo. And what we check for is to see if there is a TPM on this computer. If there's no TPM detected, then we disable the BitLocker functionality altogether. Also, if it's a virtual machine, we disable BitLocker capability. So once we've detected this ability or non-ability, we display the front end itself, and the front end gives us 3 main options, as we're going to see in a moment. The 3 options are backup old computer, which allows us to back up the data. We can do a full WIM backup locally. We can do a full WIM backup to the network, or we can indeed do a offline scan state to a network share. That offline scan state can be restored later in a new computer scenario. In other words, when you replace the computer. In addition to backup old computer, we have reinstall or refresh scenario. And in that scenario, you can reinstall the computer from XP to Windows 7, or from XP to Windows 8, and even from Windows 8 to Windows 8, or Windows 7 to Windows 7, or even Windows 7 BitLocker to Windows 7 unBitLockered, or Windows 7 unBitLockered to Windows 7 BitLockered, Windows 8 BitLockered to Windows 8 unBitLockered. The choices are nearly endless, and you make the choices.
One of the things I said to Niall earlier was, why don't you point out the things it can't do? Because it can pretty much do every scenario.
Okay, what can't it do? Well, you know, it is a BitLocker task sequence, so that's its main focus. In this demo, I'm going to deploy Windows 8 with BitLocker. You can choose even the BitLocker encryption type, the algorithm. So if you want 256 or 128 AES, you can select it. If you were doing Windows 7 deployment, you could actually select AES D, which is the diffuser ability, but they've dropped that ability in Windows 8. They're depreciating it. So now if you pop over here again, you'll see that something is going to happen, and in fact it's telling us that it has run out, that it's not connected to power. But that's okay. If we had power, we would connect it and click OK. So let's hope it doesn't run out of battery. Now it's going to display the HTA, and I will talk quickly so that we can get through the HTA as quickly as possible. On the left hand side here we have the backup scenario. If I click on that, it gives us some options, and the options are: you can run check disk, you can back up the full WIM backup locally, you can do a full backup to the network, or you can scan state, do an offline scan state in WinPE, which will X-copy to a network share. And that can be utilized over here when you restore by choosing the one that has been previously backed up, right? But we're not doing that because we're only interested really in a refresh scenario. In the refresh scenario, we have the ability to enable SCEP, which installs the System Center Endpoint Protection Client as part of the task sequence, so you're protected even before OSD is completed. We can indeed enable BitLocker or remove that, which will disable BitLocker. So if the system is already BitLockered, it will decrypt the disk. We don't want to do that. We want to enable BitLocker. By typing in a user here, it does two things. It makes that user a local admin, which you can disable that entire group if you don't want them to be a local admin in the task sequence. The other option is it makes that user the primary device affinity user. So if you have targeted applications to this device and you've made sure that the requirement is that the user is the UDA user, then this is how to do it. The last option is new computer scenario, where you can choose regional settings, which is useful in Europe, and language options. And in addition to that, you can decide what type of BitLocker algorithm you want to choose, and of course how you want to restore your data. But we're doing a refresh scenario. We're moving from Windows 8 BitLockered to Windows 8. Lastly, I want to point out down here that we have some other options. You can see the task sequence name quite clearly there, and the USMT rule set, so that when you change your USMT rules, you can keep track of that. If I click on CM trace, it will open up SMSTS log, which of course is the log that you look at when you're trying to debug problems with your task sequence. I'll move that out of the way. In addition to that, we have an info button. When you click on that, it gives you info about your deployment, which is very good, because now you can see the MAC address, you can see all sorts of other useful information which helps you as a person who's deploying this. So let's start the deployment. It gives us a confirmation message, tells you what choices you've made. We're enabling SCEP, and we're enabling BitLocker refresh. So let's go ahead. The entire process is going to take approximately 20-25 minutes. It's now 10:05 p.m. and hopefully by 10:30 or so we should have a fully deployed Windows 8 computer with some data restored on the desktop. What we didn't show you in this video is that this computer already had a customized desktop background, which was a purple flower, I think, with some registry key on the file on the desktop, some log files, and some things pinned to the taskbar. This is a refresh, so it's reinstalling Windows 8 and wiping the drive, then installing a new copy of Windows 8, and then restoring the data. So that's all done in an automated fashion, even though this drive is BitLockered. Alright, so that's very important to know that it's BitLockered. The BitLocker drive will be suspended, unlocked, the operating system will be laid down, data will be recovered later on, and all will be good. So, off it goes. It's about to restart. After the restart, because now it has already done the magic of unlocking the drive, after the restart it's going to back up the data. It's now staging the boot image into the BD partition. You will notice in this task sequence that we create the BDE partition at the end of the task sequence, and we create the BDE partition to be 1 gig in size. Normally Microsoft recommends that it's between 100 and 300 megs. The reason we create it as 1 gig is because we're doing a refresh scenario in Windows PE, we're not starting it from within Windows. So we need to stage the boot win somewhere, and the boot win is quite big. So we make the BD partition 1 gig. That solves that problem. So off it goes. It's restarting now. After the restart, it will resume the task sequence automatically. And what you will notice is that it starts to do scan state, and that's offline scan state in WinPE. So it will back up all the user's data and using hard linking. And the advantage of that, of course, is speed. So we retain the data, but we wipe the OS. All right? So first, it's going to back up all the data according to your USMT XML defined rules. After it's backed up the data, it wipes the drive of everything else but your data, and then it lays down the new OS. Okay. After it's laid down the OS, it re-enables BitLocker, restores the data, and presents us with the desktop for us to log in and see that it was a successful deployment. Alright, at this point the task sequence has backed up the user's data. It has then wiped the drive. It has then applied the operating system to the computer, and it has set up the config manager and Windows step. It's now rebooting and starting Windows 8 setup. That should take, I don't know, 5-10 minutes more of setting up before it installs the MBAM client, restores the data, creates the local admin user. It's already done the user device affinity, and then finally creates a file on the router C to say that the image was successfully installed. So at this point, it's looking good. We're really progressing. Do you want to just show?
Yeah, sure. Let's get back to the laptop. It's actually doing the build. We can see Windows 8 is actually doing its preparation now.
Yeah, at this
Having
point,
a problem with the zoom and the focus, sorry.
So at this point it has installed the OS. It's now setting up the OS.
There we go.
Where we're at. I can't remember, did we choose to install SCEP or not, but
I think we unticked it. I'm not.
did we? Alright. Well, anyway, this part is setting up Windows, so it's going to detect the hardware and install any drivers that it requires. And after it's done that, it will continue on with the task sequence. So it'll restart again and continue on with the task sequence. There's very few steps left in the task sequence, other than restoring the state, which is the user's data. That's, of course, a very important step. Then it will configure and enable BitLocker. And how it does that is, as it has suspended BitLocker and unlocked the drive, all it has to do is to basically reverse those actions. In other words, re-enable BitLocker. So it doesn't have to go through full disk encryption or any of that, because the disk is already encrypted. It's just suspended it during the entire OS installation. So it re-enables BitLocker, and once it's done that, installs the MBAM client and drops us at the Windows desktop login screen. So if you want to point out Windows 8.
So we're almost at the end of the Windows 8 setup phase, and we're getting ready for the next boot, which will take us into the operating system, where the task sequence can continue to step through the actions to get the last pieces, as Niall said, in place.
The hard disk is going crazy here because I guess it's still busy. So here it's restarting. After this restart, it's definitely going back into the task sequence, where the state restore is going to happen, as I said. And after the state restore, it will re-enable BitLocker and then install the MBAM client and then drop us to the desktop login screen. So hopefully we will have job done, because remember I said it's going to take about 25 minutes?
Yep.
I think that was at 10:05. I wasn't exactly correct because it's now 10:33. So about 30 minutes.
It's coming up to another reboot now.
Yep.
There we go.
I think things should go quite quickly now. We're really at the end of the process. But of course, you know the expression about watching
paint dry. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
But also, what's that expression? Watch kettle never boils,
Yeah.
or whatever it is.
Yeah. But it's worth watching.
It is.
This is a very sexy task sequence, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean the fact that it's doing its job totally automated after you make your choice. It's fantastic. Now, some people say, well, why do you even have a front-end HTA to give you these options? Why don't you just use zero touch? Well, I'll give you one good reason why you shouldn't be afraid of that. The reason will be this. Imagine you have a scenario where someone's computer is blue screening, and obviously it's, in that particular instance, it's not a hardware issue, it's a software issue, and Windows needs to be reinstalled. In that particular case, this scenario is perfect because it will reinstall Windows, which fixes the problem, but in addition to that, it's going to back up all the data and restore it. Yeah? Mm-hmm. So in a situation like that where the computer is crashing or doesn't boot into Windows, or blue screens as soon as it gets into Windows, of course you can't run the task sequence from within Windows then.
Yep.
So by BXC booting and selecting your options, it definitely gives you more flexibility, and it also allows you to save the CEO's computer when it's in a bad state.
So what would have happened to the CEO's computer before this task sequence now? What kind of things would people have to do to recover that data? It would be very manually intensive.
They would have to do manual actions, probably, connect a USB key and copy the data off manually, which would majorly suck.
So you could really waste about a day or so trying to get the CEO's machine back up, whereas if you use this task sequence, we can get all that data recovered and, as much as we can within 30 odd minutes. And as you pointed out, we can back up a whole image of the hard drive so that if the CEO notices that anything is missing, we can just restore that WIM, or we can use ImageX to attach it and draw out what we need from the file system.
Exactly.
Obviously, sorry, carry on.
Exactly. So if you're paranoid about losing any data, you can choose the option to do the full WIM backup, either locally or to the network. And that way, if anything was missed by your USMT rules, you can come back to it and pull that data out.
That's a very important point, because you really don't want the CEO to say, where's my image? Or where's my data?
Yep.
And you don't want to send that hard drive off to a forensics lab to try and recover it. So really what you do need to do is visit windows-noob.com, grab this task sequence, implement it in your dev environment, have a little play, get used to it, and then put it out in your production environment for the engineers to be able to use to recover from such events, or to actually use it in production to migrate machines, as Niall pointed out earlier on, for XP to Win7 BitLocker and such, and all the other possible scenarios that we covered.
Or indeed XP to Windows 8, or Windows 7 to Windows 8, or Windows 7 to Windows 7, or Windows 8 to Windows 8.
The only thing it doesn't do is it doesn't take Windows XP to Mac, because it's pretty rubbish, Mac. So we're just staying in the Windows Microsoft ecosystem.
Yep, we're not deploying any Mac OS here. So.
Obviously that was a joke, so please don't send me offensive emails. I do like Macs, but like most things, there's a time and a place.
Exactly.
So I think we can flip back over to the task sequence now. Let's just see where we are with things. Absolutely disaster with the focus, but I think you can appreciate we are doing this with a mobile phone. Very impromptu recording. We've got the classic task sequence step here to install the configuration manager client. So we're not
as far forward as we thought we were.
No.
So let's pause it again, the video, and we'll come back in a couple of minutes.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Niall. We'll see you soon.
All right. Okay. Sorry for the delays. It's still firing to the task sequence. At this point now, it's restoring the data.
Let's have a little look at that dialog.
Yep.
So you can see it is actually doing USMT user state migration.
So it's X-copying some files, and now it's going to restore the data.
We are.
That should go pretty quickly.
The refresh scenario.
And directly after that, it should configure and enable BitLocker in Windows. The hard disk is definitely going crazy, so it's re-indexing all of those hard links right now, as you can see.
Still on there. There we are, almost at the end.
Yeah.
It's playing around the file.
It's going to be worth it. It's going to be worth it. Let's just hope that your phone doesn't run out of battery. Does your phone shut down when it's like...
No, it'll go to the last drop. We've got 9% here, so we should be good for the audience.
And who is the audience exactly?
Those lucky people in the community that us MVPs work hard to satisfy.
Yeah. Alright, the hard disk is still going nuts. It's a pity we didn't have an SSD in this computer.
What I'm going to...
Oh, here we go.
Look,
now it's re-enabling BitLocker.
Here we are. I just saw that. Yep.
And another restart. This is definitely the last restart.
Due to battery, I'm going to pause this and come back. Hi community. Well, we're back. Gangnam style. No, really, we're at the very final stages here. Again, I have Niall Brady here from Windows-Noobs.com, and we're just going to flip back to the laptop now as it completes the refresh scenario. And I was completely drunk at the time. The famous Windows logo.
Windows 8.
Windows 8 logo.
So this is Configuration Manager 2012 Service Pack 1. All right. So it's using the Windows ADK on the back end, and also MBAM 2, which is currently in beta. So at the moment you see it's resuming the BitLocker disk, and it's going to do a few final actions before we see the login screen to Windows 8. So this is it. We are right there.
This is a really comprehensive solution.
Yeah.
You've covered everything from end to end here.
Now it's installing the MBAM client, and the reason for that is to actually add the key back up to the MBAM database. And that's it. Job is done. So any moment now we're going to see the login screen.
And I'm going to roleplay being the CEO. No, that's just damn amazing. You get a pay rise right now. You've saved all my data, and we've not wasted company time.
Look, there it is.
Look at that.
Yep.
Oh, this is awesome, actually.
So let's log on as test user.
Because that's the user you punched into the HTA earlier.
Yep.
Yep.
Off it goes. Now remember what I said was what we should see on the desktop, because this is migrated data, we should see a purple flower, a registry file, a folder called logs or something with some files in it, and some icons pinned to the
Taskbar.
Yeah, taskbar.
So there's a lot of small little files that we expect to see that will give us an indication that the user state migration took place successfully.
Oh yeah, and in addition to that, on the root of the C drive, there is a file called image completed successfully.
Is that dropped by the task sequence?
Yes, it's the last step of the task sequence. It actually creates a file called imagesuccessful.txt, and it echoes in the date and the time of that, so that you can, if you're browsing the computer later, you can see exactly when the image was
I can already see an indication that we have a purple flower.
So I'll click on that, and just like I said, there is a purple flower. There are some files and folders. If we look up here, you'll see there's the registry file I said. There is a below that there is a logs folder which contains log files, and on the taskbar we have those pinned items, the command prompt, computer management, and regedit. So that's it. It's been a successful transformation. Oh, one last thing. Let's open up Explorer, and you can see it's BitLockered.
Yeah. That's Flash. Let's just have a look at the root of the C, just to make sure.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So you see that it's successful. There it is, image successful, and you will see the date and the time is in there as well.
Let's crack that open.
Yep. There it is.
There we go. Yeah, that's pretty impressive now.
It is, isn't
I really
it?
do like this.
And in addition to this, it writes a registry value as well, so you can use it for reporting.